Right, so we are continuing our talk about the different substances our body requires as part of nutrition, and we'll talk about mineral ions. Right, these are also sometimes called mineral salts. Right, so we get carbon and hydrogen, oxygen, and then nitrogen and sulfur, right, from the three food classes. But that's not all the, like, those are not all the elements that the body requires. Right, so we have some others that we need, and those are iron and calcium. Right, we also get sulfur and phosphorus from the proteins. I mentioned sulfur, we also get phosphorus. Right, so we still need iron, and we can get these from red meats like liver and kidney. So red meats, and right, also from eggs, whole grains, and brown rice. And other vegetables. Why do we need iron? Primarily because iron is a component of hemoglobin, right? Or right, the alternative spelling hemoglobin. Right, in red blood cells, and these are what actually enable the red blood cells to carry oxygen. So they affect their oxygen binding capacity. Now, right, we know that red blood cells do not have a nucleus, and so they tend to die off in about 3 months, and then new are made. Right, so the hemoglobin from the ones that are dying off is recycled in the liver, and therefore the iron is reused. But some of the iron is lost in feces. Right, and so there you need new iron, because if you don't get new iron, you're going to have an iron deficiency, right, which is termed as anemia. Right, and that is basically a lowered oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, which makes sense. right? And if you got lowered oxygen carrying capacity, then obviously the oxygen that is being provided to the cells and the tissues of the body will be lower, and so right, you're going to have you know noticeable effects of that, because basically the cells won't be able to respire properly. So right, iron is also needed by muscles. So this, it's also needed by muscles, and right, enzymes, and right, symptoms of anemia, right, include feeling very weak, tired, and irritable. So if you're feeling weak and tired all the time, and consequently you're sleeping a lot, right, you might have low, like you might be anemic. And if this condition carries on, obviously it's going to affect your day-to-day life, your functions, and your overall health. Because again, if your body's cells are not getting enough oxygen because of reduced carrying capacity of the red blood cells, then right, they right get tired out very quickly. And when they get tired out, you get tired out very quickly, right? And every single living cell of the body requires oxygen. So okay, then we've got calcium, and we already talked about, right? So the bones and teeth, which are teeth are basically bones, kind of, right? And all of these are made up of calcium phosphate, and so you need calcium for these guys, right? The thing is that calcium is not soluble, and it is not readily uh, absorbed from the gut, right? And so that's where vitamin D comes in. We've talked about vitamin D helping in the absorption of calcium. So all of this is linked. Calcium is also needed for you know muscle contraction and nerve impulses. It's not just the bones. And transmission of nerve impulses. And we also mentioned that you know deficiency of calcium will result in weak bones, right? A condition called rickets in children, and possibly osteoporosis and osteomalacia in adults. Then you've got dietary fiber. Right? Dietary fiber has made an appearance earlier. Right, so this is mostly the cellulose from plant matter, mostly. And as I mentioned, helps in digestion. So what it does do is It increases the contents of the colon. It helps to retain water. And it also uh, softens the feces, right, which makes it pass out easily. Right, and if it's passing out easily, it's taking less time. So, right, we're preventing constipation. Constipation is, right, when you are unable to pass feces and it becomes dry and hard, and that is obviously problematic. So it's essential for a healthy colon and healthy digestion. Uh, Obviously, vegetables, whole grain cereals, right, are good sources. Uh, yeah, and that's given in the text. And finally, you've got water, right? So we know that the contents of our body are more or less 70% water, right? Blood, body, tissue fluid, you know, everywhere. And so you need lots of water, right? Uh, Materials are carried in solution in the body. Body, particularly in the blood, right? The environment in the cell is also aqueous, so that's water, right? Many excretory products are, removed, right? Dissolved in water, so that's basically urine in solution, and so it's a solvent plus transport medium plus, right, medium for excretion, and right, it also takes parts in reactions in cells, right, as a solvent, so which we just mentioned, and sometimes as a reactant as well, right? So it's actually taking part. It's in the chemical reactions that occur, and so we lose water by multiple ways, right? Via sweating and breathing and urination, evaporation, and so you need to stay hydrated. You need to drink enough water. It's like during the summer, it's kind of easy because if you're feeling thirsty, that means your body needs water. So the feeling of thirst is an automatic indicator and regulator of the body's requirement for water. In the winter, you may not feel as thirsty even if you need water, so you need to keep yourself, particularly hydrated. Okay, any questions about any of that?
No.
Pretty simple, right? So then we move on to the human digestive system. Now, I'm guessing I won't be able to cover the entire chapter today's class, and so I'll take it to hopefully to a point where we can comfortably stop and then renew after our winter break. So digestion, right, starts well in the mouth as soon as you take something, right? As soon as something is put into the mouth, and right then it follows, right, you're going to chew it, you're going to swallow it, it goes into the stomach, etc. So we'll talk about all those processes, right? And so the thing is that the food we eat is very large, and so right, the process of digestion breaks it into small molecules. Why? Right, that are soluble. We just talked about the importance of water, right? Why? It's so that it can be absorbed and utilized, right? So you can't, place uh, like a big chunk of bread, big piece of bread or anything else in your mouth and swallow it whole and then expect, oh well, I fed myself. No, right? Uh, if you eat large chunks of food, it's probably going to cause some indigestion or problem. Now, digestion occurs in two ways. You have physical digestion, and this is right the physical, obviously, as the name suggests, the physical breakdown of food. So basically, making those large molecules like large chunks smaller. So it mm, is primarily taking place in the mouth, right, through the action of chewing, but also takes place somewhat in the stomach, which we'll mention, right? The churning of the stomach. So the stomach moves and mixes everything up. And then a bit uh, in, right, the action of bile. So that will also be, we'll mention that when that particular stage comes. So emulsification, if you remember, we did a food test for fats in which we came across the term emulsification. So that is the breakup of fats into small droplets with increased surface area, right? Fats or lipids
Yeah.
by bile, right? So these three processes are what are categorized under physical digestion. Then the other one is called chemical digestion. And this is the, as the name suggests, the chemical breakdown of food molecules, right? From large molecules, example, you have proteins, to smaller ones, such as for proteins, you're going to break them down into the amino acids, which we talked about yesterday, right? But over here, we're going to talk about where it happens and like how it happens somewhat. We're not going into a lot of detail. This is O level, but yeah. So starting off with physical digestion, right? The very first step of the process you mentioned begins as soon as you put something in your mouth, you start chewing it, right? And so you have teeth, right? The process of chewing your food. And so I'm not going to keep repeating this, right? Uh, you're chewing your food, so you're physically breaking down large pieces, physically large pieces into smaller pieces, right? You're breaking it, you're biting, you're tearing off pieces of larger proportions, like, of a larger chunk. You're taking in smaller bites comparatively, and then you're chewing and grinding and mixing, and so you're just like really breaking it down before swallowing it. So uh, right, when you look at our teeth, we have four different kinds. You have what are called incisors, and right, they're at the very front. They are chisel shaped, right? So sort of like that. Obviously not exactly like that, but chisel shaped. And right, so they have a sharp edge. And so what's their function? So their function is biting off pieces of food. Next up, you've got your canines. And these are to either side of the incisors, right? They are slightly more pointed, and they have a similar function. So biting off pieces of food, it's sort of like, you got bread and vegetables and stuff, so maybe, incisors are more used for those, whereas you got meaty products, tough substances, and so incisors come in more handy with those kind of, right, materials. But their function is similar to the incisors. So biting off and tearing off pieces of food. Then you got your premolars. And these guys are behind or come after the canines, and again on either side, right? So this is what your jaw is semicircular. You've got your incisors over here in the center. You've got canines on both sides. Then you've got premolars on both sides, and then finally your molars. So they have two points which are called cusps, and one or two roots. So we'll talk about the structure of teeth. And they are for, tearing and grinding food. And then you finally got your molars, or molars, I believe. And so these are the ones found at the very back of your mouth, again on either side. And they have 4 or 5 cusps, so points, along with 2 to 3 roots. And they are for chewing and grinding food. Any questions?
No.
Okay, now the structure of the tooth. So the part of the tooth that we can see sticking out of our gums is called the crown. Right, then you've got the gums, which is a layer of tissue that is covering up, that's coming over the jawbone. And then underneath, right, embedded in the jawbone, the rest of the part of the tooth that you cannot see, the whole thing is called the root. Right, so it's not like don't think of it as the root of plants, right? The part you can see is the crown, the part you can't see is the root. Now, right, in the part that we can see, right, the white part, that's the very hard layer, the outermost hard layer. And it is called the enamel. Underneath that is a well, before that, right? So and this is in the crown region, right? In the root region, instead of the enamel, you have something called cement, not to be confused with the gray kind of cement that's used in building, right? And this is used to sort of uh, the reason they call it cement is because, right, like regular cement, which sort of sticks things together, this enables the tooth to have a strong grip in the jaw. Then you have the inner layer, which is called the dentine. Question. Yes.
Like, I don't know if it's a myth or is it actual, but there is a myth going on that the people with yellow teeth have a strong enamel. Is it true or not?
Oh no. Right? Your teeth, unless they are for some reason naturally yellow, for some reason, right? When babies grow their teeth, they're white, right? And they're white because they are, right, a salt of calcium, the calcium phosphate, right? And so we know that uh, group 2 metal, it's a group 2 metal, right? But they form white compounds mostly. So, right, that's the reason. So if they're yellow, it's most likely because of something they're eating. So it has nothing to do with the strength of the enamel at all. right? It is most likely some form of discoloration to the best of my like understanding, right? If there is like some scientific discovery that links the color, because for as long as I know, if you had like yellow teeth, the doctor would always tell you to brush your teeth properly, or you'd go to the dentist and have some descaling process to remove whatever layer has formed over your teeth to make them white again. So yeah, unless there's some new research and discovery about coloration and strength, that's, as you said, it's just a myth, it's false. Okay. So the inner layer is called the dentine, right? And it is softer than the enamel, obviously. uh, and then underneath that is the pulp cavity, and this is where you will find all the blood vessels and nerves, right? So the fact that blood is being supplied to your teeth and their nerves means it is very much alive and it can feel, and that's why you feel pain or a sensation when you have something hot or cold, or when you have a problem with your tooth or you get hurt, right, somewhere perhaps. And these actually enter through small holes at the base of the root. So both the blood vessels and nerves, they enter the pulp cavity through small holes at base of the roots. Any questions?
No.
Right. So I'm just going to go on to explain something called peristalsis, which is what happens in your food canal, the esophagus as it's called, when you swallow. And I'll stop after that because obviously, like even if you have some time left, it won't be enough to complete the next section. So next up is and then I'll show you an illustration of the tooth and then the process of peristalsis uh, from the textbook. Now keep in mind, peristalsis is not considered part of physical digestion. It's just something that happens to move the food along the alimentary canal or the gut, right? It is the contraction of muscles in muscles of the walls of the, either you call it the alimentary canal, alimentary with an A, not an E, ALI, alimentary canal, or the gut, right? To move food or to push it forward. And so the alimentary canal has layers of muscles. It has both, circular muscles and longitudinal muscles. So again, right, the alimentary canal has layers of muscles which are called circular muscles because they go round the wall, and longitudinal muscles because they go the length of the wall. And so when the circular muscles contract, Obviously, due to contraction, they make the canal, the alimentary canal, narrow. And then, right, this is followed by another contraction just below it. And this follows, right? So there's like a wave of contractions, and that is what peristalsis is, right? And what this does is it moves the food forward. So when you chew and you swallow your food, the food enters, right? It enters your food pipe, if you want to call it that, and it is called the esophagus, right? Or the gullet. There's another word for it, gullet. So, right, your esophagus is, present in the same area as your windpipe, which goes into your lungs, right? And so from your mouth, there's actually passage to both, right? And that's why you can breathe through your mouth, right? Because you can take in air from your mouth and it will go in, not into your stomach, but into your lungs. And so there is sort of a flap called the epiglottis. So the proper name is epiglottis, right? That covers up the entrance to the windpipe. And so windpipe. And so this allows the food to go into the esophagus and not the windpipe, right? And so it prevents food from going into the windpipe and thereby your lungs. And so sometimes when you suddenly start choking and coughing on your food, that's probably some particles of food entered your windpipe. Uh, and so you start coughing to remove that because you do not want food uh, over there. Now, when you swallow, the first action of swallowing is voluntary, but it very soon becomes involuntary. It becomes a reflex action, and so everything else happens on its own. You cannot control it. Once you take it to the back of the mouth and slightly lower, right, entering the esophagus, that's it. It will move on its own. It goes over to reflex action, and when we talk about reflex arcs and everything, it goes over to reflex action and involuntary movements. So swallowing is a reflex action, meaning
So
it is,
what's meant by,
huh?
I was asking what is meant by reflex action.
Meaning it is not in our control. It's something that the body does on its own.
Oh, okay.
So what we do is basically what we call swallowing is we take the food to the back of the mouth at the entrance of the esophagus, right? The gullet. That's all we do. From there, right? The body handles it on it, like as soon as it senses, oh, there's food over there, suddenly like muscles contract and they push it down. Okay, so that's a reflex. Reflex action is something that happens in response to something that you experience, for right. An example of this, which will come in later as well, is if you feel something hot near you, you immediately pull your hand away. You experience that, right? Have,
Yes.
right? And so that is a reflex action. Your body responds on its own very quickly, right? When it feels something. So, right, in this case, if it feels food at the back of your mouth, it pushes it down, and that's swallowing. And so obviously it's right, the whole peristalsis and esophagus and everything's involved. And it takes about 6 seconds for solid food. Obviously liquids travel faster because you don't need to really push liquids down. And right, that is where I will stop. So that will be the end of class, because right, so now I will, well, end of explanation I should say. I'll take you to the text just to show you the illustrations to clarify what we've talked about in terms of the teeth and peristalsis. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Right. So this is the structure of a tooth. Right. The book also gives you all of these. Right. The incisors, the canines, the molars, and the premolars, and how the jaw looks. Right. So that's one jaw. It's the upper jaw, showing the position of the teeth and a side view of both jaws over here. And then you've got the structure of the tooth. So you've got the crown, the gum, the root, the enamel, dentine, pulp cavity, the cement, right, and the nerves and the blood vessels coming in. And here you have a representation of the process of peristalsis, right? The circular muscles are contracting over here, then over here, and so each contraction is pushing the food down and further through the alimentary canal. Any questions?
No.
All right, so next up is chemical digestion. Obviously, I'm stopping here, so we will continue from here onwards after our break, right? So I'll see you again the week of 5th January.
Okay.
All right? All right.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.